What is up, guys? It is Adventures Wanted Dungeon Master Comet here, coming at you with episode 3.5 of the Exploration series from the Dungeon Master's Toolkit. The reason why I'm making this video is because I honestly felt that my first video didn't do a good enough job of explaining the advanced portions of exploration. What it did was more or less give a very watered down, simple but generally precise way of handling travel. I'm going to be showing you now how I personally run exploration within my games regularly, and hopefully you guys will gain some insights from it. Tell me if you like it, tell me if you don't in the future. But anyway, so let's start out. Well, what I'm showing you here are 4 books that we will actually use this time for explaining these parts of the game. In front of you is my old map from 3 years ago that I made for my campaigns. It's a map of Gaia during the 224th year after the Gaian mountain range had been formed up within Soul's Rise. That's essentially summer. That's why everything seems so bright in my winter map. So it seems a little whited out. But anyway, we're going to be using this as a sample map for what we're going to do, which is taking apart the individual rules for foraging from these 4 books to get the precise rules that we will use in our games, hopefully, for adventures and overland exploration. Anyway, so let's start out with the very basics, which is going to go over the Player's Handbook content, Dungeon Master's Guide content, as well as breaking down the basic steps from the previous video. Let's recap. First thing you do, according to my previous steps that I listed in the description of my other video, forgive me if I get anything wrong, this is off the top of my head. Your group chooses their destination, you assign a travel DC, the group assigns a navigator or takes a navigation as a group, quite risky, I don't recommend it. Then they roll the navigation DC, but only after the DM has understood and mastered what is to come. If they pass, fail, or barely pass or barely fail their check. The magnitude of their success or failure based on increments of 5 whenever they roll on that navigation DC. Then they move a hex, or don't, or go in a completely wrong direction because they're lost. We'll go into that into the next video, into the next part of the video. Or they discover something. It could be good, could be bad, could be neutral. Anyway, afterwards they move through, they move the hex, you resolve, describe, that's very important, and then repeat for the next hex. So basically, roll, describe, refresh for the next hex. That's how they do it each adventuring day. And while many DMs they say kick out the stuff that slows down the campaign, that is not based on the story, I challenge that theory because I think that exploration adds another depth to the game. And gives, while it may frustrate some players if it's run incorrectly, or if the DM decides to haphazardly go about things and get all noodly with the rules, right? It is very important for instilling the fact that your campaign is set in a world. Worlds have distances. They have hazards beyond that of the exterior story. The more you ignore rules like this, the more people will begin to think, let's just hand wave those rules. Well, I could tell you, you could hand wave that one combat with 30 kobolds versus a level 12 party. But I'm telling you now, those 30 kobolds will whoop that level 20 party's ass if they get some bad rules. So, anyway, let's get back on towards the basics. These 4 books are Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, Tomb of Annihilation, and Out of the Abyss. Each of these books adds a different piece to the puzzle that is exploration. Now we will go on opening the Player's Handbook off on towards Chapter 8, Adventuring, and more importantly, the page behind it, which is Wilderness. This chapter goes over travel pace. We've talked about this in the previous video. Basically, if the player group decides to set their travel pace, aside from what is the default, which is normal speed, they can go either fast or slow. Fast means they get a -5 penalty to passive wisdom scores, but generally on a 24-mile hex on a map, they are moving 3 hexes every 2 days. That's quite big, because that's about approximately 48 miles for 2 hexes. On a slow pace, they're moving every 3 days, only 2 hexes. On a normal pace, that's 1 hex per day, direct ratio. Things like difficult terrain can impede that, making 2 hexes per 2 days for 1 hex, and so on and so forth. The rules are all here. Things like climbing, swimming, the group needing gear to be able to get through this, and noticing threats and stealth. Why you might be thinking, what is the benefit of going at a slow pace? Well, it's the fact that you're able to stealth, and we'll go about that more because Out of the Abyss gives clear-cut rules on examples and what that means. While they're present here in the player's handbook, I like how they described it in Out of the Abyss better. It's a good adventure, especially if you're going Underdark and you like those dark elves. Anyway, another aspect that we need to note from this from the player's handbook book is food and water. Each character needs a pound of food, or a half a pound if they want to go to half rations each day. A character can go without food a number of days equal to 3 plus his or her wisdom, constitution, why did I say wisdom, modifier. At the end of each day, beyond that limit, a character automatically suffers 1 level of exhaustion. What does exhaustion mean? First level, disadvantage on all ability checks. Already painful. Second level, pretty sure you're hitting half movement speed. That's painful also. Each level hits really hard till you're starting to have disadvantage on saving throws and attack rolls. You're starting to have half your maximum hit point until at 6 stacks you die. I've had, in my 5 years of DMing, maybe 8 players that have died from lack of food, and 6 that have died from lack of water. And that's because I employ these rules. Now, most DMs, they wouldn't even have that issue. I think it's a cool layer to add the fact that the world itself, not just the monsters in it, is dangerous. Not for me to make this whole Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition game a resource management game, but it's just a nice addition. So a character needs 1 gallon of water per day, or 2 gallons if the weather is hot. They'll discuss this later in the Tomb of Annihilation book. Or they suffer 1 level of exhaustion. So if a character has no food or water, that starts stacking, right? And unlike food, they don't have a buffer for it. If they don't have it each day, they're suffering that exhaustion level. Anyway, if a character has 1 or more exhaustion levels, the character takes 2 levels in either case. So the less water you have, it's like a death spiral almost. In the same way that a group, once one of their members goes down, they lose faster. Once you have exhaustion from lack of water or anything else, when you're out of water, you get exhausted much faster than usual. That can lead to death easily in 2 to 3 days, right? Now, let's keep going. So now that we know the importance of food, water, travel pace, and difficult terrain, we have the basic rules to come up with a very rudimentary form of exploration and travel. And assuming these distances, we can apply hexes to our map. This map doesn't have hexes, but we'll make some imaginary ones later. And we can come up with basic rules. So let's pretend, using these basic rules, that our adventurers are moving from the quicksand lakes of the desert sea all the way trying to get to the first gate of the Dwemer's Pass. Now let's imagine that each thumb is approximately at 1 mile hex. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more or less, right? A little bit of abstraction here for the purpose of this map. So 5 days as the crow flies to get from the desert sea, going around some hillsides, off towards Dwemer's Pass. Now let's get some dice over here. Stoop. Aha, this looks familiar. So using the basic rules, we're going to try and roll. We're going to take note of the rules from the previous video, the DM's Toolkit number 3. So we assigned a navigation DC. Since they're moving from the desert sea all the way back to Dwemer's Pass, it's going from a difficult area towards a more civilized, guarded area home towards the dwarves of the Gaian mountain range. So we're gonna roll for it. Let's say since they're moving through the desert, they're hugging the mountain sides, avoiding the harsh sands of the Gaian desert. The terrain is desert, right? But let's say the navigation DC is 15, right? So assuming a basic character's wisdom, let's say he has a +2. Let's say he's not proficient in survival. He makes a roll. That is a natural 1. Oh dear God. Not only did he fail the DC by 14, he got a natural 1, and I apply natural 1s in my games to ability checks and saving throws. But for the purpose of this navigation DC check, it's going to be all downhill from here. So not only does he not only does he fail to make progress, he also goes the wrong way, perhaps due to exhaustion, moving through the desert. And they make no headway, basically. Then a hostile encounter occurs, most likely very powerful combat. I'm talking about those blue dragons right here, guys. That's gonna hurt. Anyway, so what's going to happen is we are going to continue on adding more of these rules. That's a very basic version of these. If they had food, if they had water, maybe they'd be able to drink, eat. Otherwise, they'd have to forage. But the player's handbook doesn't have too much of those rules in here. What is the next book we have at our disposal? The Dungeon Master's Guide. Let's turn into my page over here, the Wilds. This goes over the travel montage approach and the hour-by-hour approach. We choose this one, and using a day-by-day approach, as aforementioned in the previous video. That's how I run my games. Movement on the map is indicated similarly to the way it is on the player's handbook. Adding this piece of the puzzle towards this, assuming a 24 hex map, that's pretty good, right? So, over here, mapping the wilderness, we have our map here. Look at that, all across the entire continent of Gaia. Well, slightly covered because of my books here. Sorry, orcs. And we've got here everything from wilderness features to monster lairs, monuments, tables for all sorts of interesting wilderness survival. But what we're going after are no, not just the detriments and hazards, but the foraging. So the foraging, characters can gather food and water as the party travels at a normal or slow pace. You may be some characters that want to get somewhere will try to always go fast-paced, but as aforementioned here, fast-paced characters traveling overland, -5 penalty to passive perception scores, which means they are more likely to get surprised. And here, they can't forage for food and water. 2 reasons why you don't want to travel overland at a fast pace. That's why it's usually as a last resort, when you really need to get somewhere. Anyway, so the foraging DC is 10 for areas with abundant food and water, 15 for limited food and water sources, and 20 for very rare, if any, food and water sources. Multiple characters can make a forage check, and each character makes a separate check if they want to. You may be wondering why wouldn't anyone want to not want to forage? Well, I'll tell you later. A foraging character finds nothing on a failed check. On a successful check, roll 1d6 plus the character's wisdom modifier to find out how much food in pounds the character finds. Then repeat the roll for water. So you're actually able to find a good amount of food and water every time you're moving about, right? But these checks are only prompted when a character asks for it, and when a DM states that there is an opportunity for it. Oftentimes players will ask for it, but if you as a DM decide there is absolutely no way, you just give them the DC 20. Give them the DC 15, or don't give them a check at all if you think it's impossible. Anyway, so for food and water, you can see that creatures can be broken down. Anything from a horse, one unlucky horse that has lived out its usefulness to the group, to that one wolf that the ranger decides to hunt. You can come up with pounds of food available towards the group, right? Anyway, so based on their size, you can get that. Gargantuan creatures, 64 pounds of food, that's 64 rations. You may be wondering though, What's the point of rations when you can forage so much food? Well, I'll tell you in just a moment. Out of the Abyss, which is our next book that we're going to cover. Wilderness navigation is also listed here. Some nice little examples. But becoming lost, note here. Unless they are following a path or something like it, adventurers traveling in the wilderness run the risk of becoming lost. The party's navigator makes a wisdom survival check when they decide it's appropriate against a DC determined by prevailing terrain, shown on the wilderness navigation table. I also provided a navigation table in my previous episode, DM's Toolkit number 3, in a description. As shown there. If the party is moving at a slow pace, the navigator gets a +5 bonus to the check. And if they're going at a fast pace, the navigator gets a -5 penalty. If the party has an accurate map of the region, the navigator has advantage on the check. So that's where it states where maps can come in handy. Maps are handy when you get lost. Also, I like applying, giving a member advantage when they are navigating through the terrain when they have an accurate map. Anyway, if the wisdom survival check succeeds, the party travels in the desired direction without becoming lost. If the check fails, the party inadvertently travels in the wrong direction. And the DM can prompt navigation checks to the group's assigned navigator in order to not be lost. Otherwise, every time they try to make a navigation check, automatically fails. What you can do is a party gets lost, and the DM can do things one of two ways. He can tell them that they're lost, or he can keep it hidden. And every day they're not making any progress. Let's go into rules for Out of the Abyss now. Let's put this over here. So, before we go into that, let's add more of this piece to the puzzle. So our characters are moving 5 days from the Desert Sea to the Dwemer Pass. They are going to make a navigation roll. The DC is still 15. The poor guy is still lost, gets a hostile encounter, and the group goes a whole day without any sort of respite or moving through, right? They're in dangerous territory because they're out in the wilderness, but besides that, they now must make a foraging DC, otherwise they have to reduce food and water from their inventory. Let's say that the one member of the group is alone, so he has no rations, for example. It's a bad situation. He fails a foraging DC because he only has a +2, and he is now out of food. Let's see if he's able to find water in the desert, and the DC is he's able to find a little bit of water, perhaps sifting the sands, doing some MacGyver stuff to get the resources he needs. That is going to allow him to get food, but no water. If that trend continues, eventually he might die out in this desert, especially because he is lost, and now he has to try to get out of there. Let's try to make a DC to get out. DC 15 still. He has a map, so he should have advantage on this. Actually, he should have had advantage on another roll. Let's say he doesn't have a map. He makes a roll, still lost. Poor guy. He's been out there for 2 days. Let's say his name is Dale. Dale the Navigator. Not too good a navigator, are you, Dale? Anyway, let's open up Out of the Abyss. And, by the way, those are some signatures from my players. Don't worry about those. My book has not been graffitied. Anyway, so we are looking here at additional rules for mapping and foraging. A bunch of this is rehashed or rewritten, rephrased versions of rules in a Dungeon Master's or Player's Handbook. But over here we have well-worded rules for noticing threats. The passive perception score of characters, if the party counts towards noticing hidden threats, only if the following conditions are met. If they are able to see the threat, or if they are not engaged in other activities, including navigating or foraging. What that means is, if a member of the party is foraging, and that's why I was telling you guys, you might not want to be foraging out there in the wilderness all the time, not everyone in the group at least, because your passive perception is not added to the party. That is painful. If the high wisdom, high perception cleric is unable to see the upcoming horde because he is busy foraging, that is a huge detrimental aspect to the group, because now they have a better chance of getting surprised by the enemy. Ouch. Actually, just one class has the ability to circumnavigate this issue, which is a ranger, which allowing them to be alert to all danger, despite being navigating and foraging all the time. But not every group has a ranger. Now, understanding navigating, additional rules for mapping are all present here, but noticing threats is what's super important in this setup. Things like marching order, creature food yield are also rehashed from the Dungeon Master's Guide. We've got information here about additional aspects such as madness, but you may be wondering why would madness pop up? Because it's listed here under the foraging aspect. Unless they obtain a steady supply of food and water, adventurers must forage to survive on their journey, yada 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 yada. Characters can gather food and water if the party is traveling only at a normal and slow pace. So it's the same in this book too. Characters must make a wisdom or survival check. The DC is typically 15, but might be as high as 20 in some parts of the Underdark. This is for the Underdark. I usually apply 15 on the regular. Some spells, such as create food and water and Goodberry, can help provision the party, but that removes resources from the party on a very irregular basis. Essentially, knock off 1 or 2 spell slots from one of your casters all the time just because of food and water. Anyway, so characters need to forage and acquire supplies. The more desperate they become, the more that it encourages them to travel out to distant areas. Creatures, and this is the part I'm trying to get to, creatures might be killed and can be butchered by the party, but the meat they yield spoils after a single day if uneaten. I apply this all the time, unless the party has cooking utensils or some creative way to freeze the food on the regular. In which case, I let it last for as long as up to a week, right? But that is why foraging food is not a sustainable way of maintaining one's rations. Well, regardless how much food you find, your party can only eat so much, right? Well, they only need to eat so much, and everything else extra spoils the day after. So when you're foraging, all you're doing is trying to avoid consuming your rations, which avoiding consuming your rations means keeping death a few more days away while you're traveling. Anyway, so that is the and when you are eating spoiled meat, Constitution saving throw to keep the meal down, and a Wisdom save to avoid acquiring a level of madness through the awful experience. So spoiled food, if characters want to try and eat that old food, they can. They definitely can. But it forces a Constitution save and a Wisdom save. I'd say, since there's no rule on this, 10 plus the number of days the foods have been rotten, so 11 minimum, and a Wisdom save is same based on how rotten it was. Anyway, so that is the rules we get from Out of the Abyss. Now let's say Dale has wandered back into the desert sea since he's gotten completely lost, made no progress whatsoever. Dale then sees this interesting cactus fruit that he tries to forage, and he's gonna make a roll. The DC is 15 though, that's an 11, and what he's able to find, I'd say, is slightly spoiled cactus, and it's not fit for eating. But let's say our player is creative, and he says, I want to try it anyway. He eats it. Let's say it's a day old, DC 11. Dale has a +2 in Constitution as well. Pretty average stats. He rolls. Natural 1. He pukes up the food. Damn it, Dale. Let's see if he rolls Wisdom. 12 +2, DC 11. Well, at least he doesn't go insane. Good job, Dale. Anyway, so let's go on to the next aspect. Adding these rules as well. He is going to continue on with the navigation DC. DC 15 still. He doesn't have a map, so he's going to roll. Come on, Dale, +2. 19 +2. Finally, he gets across, and he finds a secret. Based on this map, I see this little cave here, as well as this tree. Let's say it's also within our imaginary hex, right? So there are several things he could discover. He could discover something hidden in the sands, something secret within this cavern, maybe a troll den where the trolls are luckily not home. or maybe some interesting fruit within that tree. Let's say that he goes for the tree, and that's his discovery because he succeeded so well on this check. Rules on success in the description from my previous video. And he is going to now roll for foraging from that tree since he has the opportunity. No dice. He tries his best, but tree's too high and he lands on his Dale butt. He tries foraging some other way because that was a positive encounters. That all it does is give additional opportunities. Reward your players for rolling well. He tries to roll for foraging. 16. He finds some food. Good. Dale, after 2 days of consuming rations, he is now succeeding. So he's been out in the desert for 3 days, has barely moved 24 miles from the desert sea, trying to get to Dwemer's Pass. If you think about it, this whole rolling aspect, removing the part of me explaining everything, takes little more than 1 minute, a minute 30 seconds for each traveling day. It's literally a montage. It doesn't take that much time. And it adds this funny aspect because Dale is an idiot. Anyway, shout out to my characters who actually encountered the NPC guide named Dale in Argendelle, all the way off to the north of Northern Hill in my other map for my other continent. Anyway, let's add the last piece of the puzzle, shall we? So, whoa. Whoa. Okay, getting notifications left and right. So we've got our travel DCs for the player's handbook, as well as basic navigation rules. We've added rules for locations, monuments, additional rules for foraging, as well as hazards within our Dungeon Master's Guide, and most importantly, movement on the map, which is always helpful, and basic rules for foraging and becoming lost. Now we are going to be hunkering down on the becoming lost rules. Oh, I forgot. And also additional rules for foraging from Out of the Abyss, food spoilage, madness, and consuming spoiled foods. Alright. Now, going into Tomb of Annihilation, we are going to be turning towards page 39. There we have a nice little hex map of Chult. This may seem familiar. Instead of being empty, it's now peppered in. Oh, I don't want to spoil people for people that are still playing this campaign. Oh, it's pretty good, by the way. I suggest it if you want to kill your players. Anyway, so it has step-by-step rules for expeditions. Using poster maps or hex maps, identify the hex in which the party is currently located. Don't share this information if the party is lost. That is the pain of being lost. Otherwise, just show the players the party's location by pointing to the appropriate hex on their map of Chult. That can be any map. Let the players determine which direction the party wants to go. So similar to my other rule, give them a map, tell them where they are, then let them choose a direction. And then let them assign pace. Thank you, Dungeons and Dragons. And then let the players choose a navigator, or they can make a group check, as stated in the player's handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. They then make a survival check on the navigator's behalf. The navigator makes a survival check for the group's behalf in order to determine how far they go, whether they succeed, and to determine if the party becomes lost. And if they become lost, they have no idea where they are on the map. At the end of the day, check if any members are dehydrated or out of food. So travel distances are separate for this map of Chult because it is so hazardous. You should get this book and read through it to figure out why. And it has its own rules for tracking miles because of that unique situation. But the rules for navigating are generally similar, right? Save for the unique rules here in the last paragraph. DCs for coasts and lakes, DCs for jungles, very different, right? And apply a +5 to the bonus if the check of the group sets a slow pace for the day, or a -5 if the penalty if the group is moving at a fast pace. If they are traveling through this terrain. Interesting. So, wait, let me focus this camera. Anyway, it's possible to get lost on a river by following a tributary instead of the main branch. So basically, if they're trying to move through the jungles in this thick place, these are unique rules towards that. So don't get it twisted, right? This is just for Chult, because Chult is super bad, right? Also, if the check fails, the party becomes lost. Each hex on a map is surrounded by 6 other hexes, as you can see here. Let me focus this down so you can see the individual hexes. Actually, it's hard to tell. Actually, no, you can see some of them around here in Drungrunglung. Anyway, so if the check fails, the party becomes lost. Each hex on the map is surrounded by 6 other hexes. Whenever a lost party moves one hex, roll a d6 to randomly determine which neighboring hex the party enters. Do not divulge the party's location to the players. While the party is lost, players can pinpoint the group's location on their map of Chult. The next time a navigator succeeds on a wisdom survival check to navigate, reveal the party's location to the players. So until they succeed that lost check, they have no idea where they are on this map. So Dale was lost for 3 days. For all he knows, he could be all the way here approaching the Tomb of the Ancients for Philia Soul. But, you know, as far as he's concerned, he's here and he doesn't have a map, so he can't tell. Rest in peace, Dale. There are rules for dehydration, which generally are the same. Diseases, which are additional hazards you can apply, and this book has excellent charts for diseases. Thank you, Wizards of the Coast, as well as rules for random encounters. And they have additional rules for random encounters here on the back portions of the book. They have nice little charts here, such as dead explorers, unique locations, treasure drops, supply caches, and nice little random encounter tables. You can make your own, or be like me and fly off the seat of your ass. That's the way I do it. Anyway, so we've got all the rules here. All of the advanced rules. Going from navigation DC, to foraging, to spoiled food, becoming lost, and everything in between. Dying to lack of food, dying to lack of water, dying to random encounters, not knowing where you are on the map, having a map, how it helps. Additional feats like rangers can circumvent a lot of these issues, and only one other way to do that is to pack spells and spend spell slots, or have a background feat like the Wanderer feat of the Outlander, which allows you to gather a good amount of food. But take note, all this food you gather spoils after a day. In the end, you're just preventing the inevitable, and you will need to find those rations, or just have someone with cooking utensils. Get that skill proficiency, guys. It's not the tool proficiency. It's not that hard. We'll talk about tool proficiencies and how to use them based on Xanathar's guide and some additional lessons I've learned in the next video. Dang, this DM's toolkit is long, but hence 3.5. We're basically digesting 4 sets of rules from 4 different books into this one super rule. So now we've got Dale. 5 days from Desert Sea all the way back to Dwemer's Pass. Let's restart the whole thing, applying all the rules now. Okay? Come on, Dale. You can make it out. Dale, let's set it off. He has no map. He has, let's say, 3 rations of food from that one time he was able to harness rations and whatever rations he has saved. He's eaten his fill. He's ready for a new day. And everything in the past didn't happen, right? He's just going to walk starting now. You can make it home, Dale, or at the very least back home to the dwarves. He's going to roll DC 15. He has a +2. 18. Perfect. From one moment here in the Desert Sea, he moves 1 hex, approximately 24 miles off here. No difficult terrain for Dale because I am a generous DM. He moves off towards here, and because he got an 18 +2, he succeeded the DC by 5 or more, so he gets something beneficial out of it. He wanders off towards that cave, and he finds some lost treasure. Perhaps a ring that can, a ring of prestidigitation, or something that can annoy him, which allows him to flavor food, if only he had some proper food. He flavors his rations, but before he eats those, he realizes he can make a foraging check. He rolls, and he finds no food. Can he find water in the desert? Let's set it to DC 15 still. Poor Dale. No. So he's out of... he has 2 rations of food, 2 rations of water left. Now, but he's made progress. He's 1/5 of the way there. Second day. He rolls, navigation DC 15. He has a +2 to survival. Go, Dale. And he failed. And he failed by 5 or more. So that means he's lost. Let's roll a D6 to see where he goes. 1 to 6. And he rolls a 4. So he, instead of going here, he goes here. So not too far off. It's still fine. Let's say that I allow him to make a navigation check to see if he's not lost anymore. He has a 15 DC. He has a +2 bonus. Fails. Still lost. And he's going to try to move at a slow pace this time. So he has a +5 bonus. He's going to roll. Still fail. He's still lost. That's 2 days. Let's see if he can forage. Nope. Water. Nope. He has 1 ration and 1 water left, guys. Let's see if he can make it closer. Natural 20 on the navigation DC for the 3rd day. Actually, no, to discover that he's not lost. And he's no longer lost, guys. And he tries to make for it. At least he didn't fail that badly. He just doesn't make any proper progress. He has a hostile encounter, however. And what happens is that he has to fight out this group of bandits, these marauders, moving about on sand boats that try to capture and harry him, but he hides among the hills and he escapes them, let's say. Lucky Dale. He continues to move about. He's maybe 3 days away. He tries to forage for food. Natural 1. Tries to get water. At least he finds water. So he's at 1 water, 0 food. And because of that natural 1, let's say he has to roll for madness. He passes. It's okay. Dale's had worse. Those sand marauders are pretty bad. 3 days away from home stretch. He's going to make the roll. Let's hope he doesn't get lost. 3, and he's lost. Crap. Food. Finds food and water. Makes a navigation check. Fails. Ouch. Why is Dale the poor, crappy, unclassed character alone in here? This is why a group helps. If there were multiple groups, they'd be able to forage more food. He's almost out of resources, guys. Tries to get out of Lost. Nope. Forage. Water. Finds food, water. Let's say he has 3 more days before he starts starving. Okay. So he passes navigation. Tries to get out. Lost again. And as you can see, without a proper designated person to navigate the deserts, if you only have a +2 to survival, you won't be making any progress. And that is actually quite truthful towards situation. A lot of people will hand wave the rule and say, oh, I'm a fighter, I can take down ogres, I can move across the land. But I'm telling you now, I know multiple excellent fencers in real life and master martial artists that have tried to teach me in my youth, and I can tell you almost with complete certainty, if you drop them in the desert, they would die. Right? You need someone that is trained, has advantage on these rolls, has all these crazy bonuses, and that's where the ranger comes in. I'm dropping love for this class because I think it is just so powerful, and people are hand-waving away the rules that make this class powerful. For example, if one were to decide that, when you drop to 0 hit points, you automatically die, then the Grave Cleric would be useless. If you were to walk up to someone and say, you know what, as a DM, I'm just giving you inspiration because I think you better pass this roll because it's good for the plot, then what's the point of Bardic Inspiration, right? If you decide to give out to the group what is essentially free attacks just because they're wielding 2 weapons, right? What's the point of having the 2-weapon fighting style, right? You walk around and you hand over a wizard the ability to cast multiple cantrips, then fighters are not getting any love. I'm just advocating for using all the rules that make up the game. Because as far as I'm concerned, when a dungeon master is hosting for Dungeons & Dragons, it's not his job to put challenges in front of the players. It's more his job to give opportunities to the players to shine, to allow the classes to do what they do best. it's less about challenging the players, right? But it's more about giving them those opportunities to use their interesting abilities while at the same time posing the threat that if they fail, there will be consequences. Anyway, sorry for this exceedingly long video, but this is the advanced aspects of exploration. And you can see here that there was a clear-cut example of how terribly things can go if someone goes out into the desert alone and has no experience. Even with a +2 bonus towards everything, basically, no dice, right? I hope you guys learned something from this. I'm sorry it took so much of your time, but if you're here, I appreciate you joining, and I hope you guys stay tuned for future videos. This also saying goodbye to this map, because I am going to be giving this map out as a giveaway to my huge Dungeons and Dragons meetup this Saturday on October 26th, where in all my D&D groups, a whopping 30 players will be meeting up with me to play some games and wrap up the last world event we've had, which is based off of some monsters from Matt Koval's book, reflavored by me, The Court of All Flesh, and how they're trying to consume the world, basically, in a matter of speaking. Well, goodbye, map. I made you 3 years ago, and I'm very proud of you. I'm sure your next owner will be very happy to have you as well. Now, to all you guys watching, thank you, and boop!